Hi, Stephen. Please introduce yourself in the Emerging Fellows Program. Describe how you became an Emerging Fellow.
I'm Stephen Lichty. I'm based here in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi is there on my video background. So I've lived here in Nairobi 7 years, and I have done various things here, mostly in evaluation, research, management, consulting, and so forth. Started a small boutique consulting firm in 2018. So we're just a little over 5 years old. My business partner's in Maputo, Mozambique. And then when COVID was in its infancy, I guess, attended a couple of just really fascinating futures events that had quickly been moved to a online format, virtual format. And I had been familiar with futures work for probably 25 years prior to that, when you would go to Barnes and Noble and buy, hard copy journals of the World Futures Review, or I don't even remember what they were. And and just felt that it was a little science, techie, sci-fi for me. It really didn't resonate with me at that point, but had always just had a futures foresight mindset. And when I was jumping into these conferences and webinars and so forth, just absolutely fell in love with the concept. Reach out to a couple of people, John Sweeney kind of being one of the more prominent futurists. And he helped me so much, just unleashed his whole kind of Dropbox folders of material and so forth. So really, I kind of explored this on my own. I took the specialization on Coursera with the Institute for Futures Thinking in Palo Alto, did their 5-course seminar on foresight. I did stuff with MetaFuture with Sahel Inyatullah and Ivana, and then some stuff with Action Foresight based in Jose Ramos's organization. And just really, really felt like this resonated so much with the work that I was doing. And so I was already doing some foresight and strategic planning, but all of this that I was learning in the foresight futures community was just much more structured. It resonated more with the area that I was working in. So I primarily work not so much with businesses, but more with the NGO, humanitarian aid, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, here in Kenya, East Africa, but also have, a global sort of thing. But anyway, to kind of just fast forward, decided that I really wanted to get more formal exposure to this. I already have a PhD in African studies and 2 other masters, and it seemed kind of silly to do an MPhil in future studies, but the RAND dollar rate, and Stellenbosch being it's actually the only education institute on the continent that does future studies. And they had a whole online program, and everything was accepted. Started that in February of 2021. In that process, got exposure to the World Future Studies Federation, and then AFP. Then in, I think, September of 2021, applied for the EF, knowing that this would be like a really key networking sort of opportunity.
Are there other factors that actually made you join the program?
I've had numerous fellowships before, so I in a sense knew what these were, both, say, sector-specific sort of fellowships, as well as I've had a couple of fellowships during my PhD. The Stellenbosch side really brought the theoretical, it brought the background, it brought the skill sets, it brought, you're writing papers, you're heavily engaged on a very practical plus theoretical sort of level. But what a fellowship really is often about, it's exposure to the whole profession. Yeah, my take is that Patricia really has taken it to a new level, and every year it's kind of a new iteration, and we improve things and so forth. So yeah, it really was about making those professional sort of connections.
I mean, it sounds like you're not new to fellowships and that kind of opportunities. So I'm wondering if you faced any, or if there is a challenging aspect that you faced during the application process.
By default, when you have had, I don't know, 10 fellowships or so, and as well as fund and writing proposals. So part of, the work that we do in our consulting firm is, we have to submit proposals. So these could be, a client like Save the Children or the World Bank. They say we want a 3-page proposal max, or we want 15-page proposal max. So I'm probably writing 15 to 20 proposals a year. So the emerging fellows was just, oh, this is just a day in the life of my work. So it wasn't, exceedingly difficult or anything like that. Right now I'm serving as a judge for the next generation of foresight practitioners with the School of International Futures. And I've just read through 15 applications, and I see where people who really have some really good experience and so forth, they just write a stronger application. But because there's a skill to it, because often there's a word limit. You can only have 300 words in this section, 500 words in this section. So there really wasn't a lot of challenges per se in the fellowship application process.
Yeah. So you touched on the resources that the program is providing. Are there any aspects of the resources or support that enhanced your experience even after having 20 plus years of experience in foresight?
Two things come to mind initially. One, it's not, I mean, it's a structured fellowship, but it's not like, the requirements really is that you plug in and you write blogs and you engage in that sort of space. And we have guest speakers that come in and so forth, and there it's always interesting to hear that sort of thing. Having the chance to work through Patricia's book, and each of us are taking a turn leading through that process. But it's not like, I think there's just a range. Well, one thing, anytime you do an online fellowship, it's just very different versus where you're a fellow and you're sitting in an institute for 3 to 6 months or whatever, or just fellowships that are just purely financial. It's like my dissertation research was funded by a Fulbright fellowship, so I got X amount of money to go do. So it's hands-on, but it's not. Aside from the blog writing, and I'll come to that here in a second, it's not like it requires, I don't know what, 3, 4, 5 hours a month that you put into reading and engaging in this. But on that end, to me, the value of the fellowship, Patricia's providing a platform, and it's really up to you to use that platform to do what you want to do. I mean, if you send Patricia an email, say, hey, I would love to know who that works in this sort of space, Patricia will do that for you. But she's not going to walk you through some, sort of formal sort of fellowship for yourself. It's really a group exercise, and you really take out of it what you put into it. To me, maybe the most challenging part has just been the blog writing. Now I was now writing my MPhil thesis. I found it really challenging to move from an academic writing style. So there's this idea of taking that and concisely writing it into a blog sort of format. I'm not necessarily a fan of blogs. I think it's just because I'm of a generation that this is something that's popped on the scene in the last 5-10 years. But I've actually written three articles and two book chapters and 2 more book chapters on their way. So I gravitate maybe more toward that sort of space. But Patricia really wants us to be able to condense our thought into these 800 to 1,000 word sort of blogs. So I have tons of ideas for blogs. It's just very difficult to, I almost just have to go someplace with my Mac and sit in a coffee shop. And in, a couple of hours, I can actually produce a draft blog of what I want to talk about. So the blog writing, I think, has been most challenging for that in that regard. But by Patricia pushing us to write, I just kind of went more book chapter academic article sort of space. But I have at least two blogs out, 3 blogs out, something like that. So yeah, I think that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. So you mentioned earlier that you've been already involved in the scene and you do a lot of consulting work when it comes to foresight. So I'm wondering, how did the fellowship helped you in that sense, from like a business perspective?
When you write a business proposal for a project, my business partner and I both have PhDs, and so it's very easy for us to come across as maybe too academic for the practical side. So to me, that blog writing, that conciseness, don't, babble on about things that maybe are not necessarily, related to them. So I think that writing has really helped me be more concise and more practical in everything that I'm doing. So I think that was helpful, but it was also helpful using the Foresight Futures background that I had to do a little bit of education on futures literacy for a lot of clients. Most of the humanitarian emergency relief side of things unfortunately does not practice a lot of foresight. But I think COVID has really changed that narrative in many ways. And so it's really helped me give a whole nother platform, a whole nother language, another skill set to introduce into these proposals, even if it's not directly a quote unquote foresight sort of project. But anytime that we do an evaluation of a say a 3-year, 5-year project, invariably part of the report. And again, it's helped not just with the proposal writing, it helps with the report writing for the clients. They don't want to read an academic paper. They want to read something very concise and succinct. That recommendation section can really be informed with a lot of foresight, because then you can help them understand that, look, you did not really do a lot of great foresight work when you launched this project 5 years ago. And we would recommend that you think through where this programming is going to be in 5 years, so that you can start planning and working with scenarios, working with these sort of things. So that's really been helpful from, say, the business side of things.
The last question, or maybe the one before the last, it doesn't apply to you given your experience in the field, but I'm really curious, like I'm gonna rephrase it a bit, and I'm curious if there's anything that surprised you going through surprised you in terms of your understanding of the field itself.
I have found most unique about the whole field of foresight and futures is, and because my PhD was in comparative politics, and during that 6 years that it took to pursue that, I found out that within political science, there's all these different camps, there's all these schools of thought and so forth. And I had a suspicion that similar realities were there within the foresight and futures community. So by diving into this, it was really helpful to see, yeah, there's quite a few camps. There's very much a business, marketing trends, signals, and it's really geared around business mentality. And then there's more of a critical side. There's the decolonizing of futures, which is really where I resonated with that crowd. I really resonated more with a qualitative crowd, Sahel Aniatola's work has probably informed me the most. And because I think he is just open to all those elements that are deeper into the changes that need to happen in any sort of society. So mine is still very much in humanitarian aid, development, peace building, these really messy sort of spaces where a lot of people don't necessarily have that sort of expertise. So that would be one. And the second one is that I'm fascinated with is just this identity crisis. Like I've been in APF enough and have been in these circles where who are we, and how do we credential us? How do we Alex Fragnani created the term charlatan futurists, these people who, because we can go into LinkedIn and we can say who in the LinkedIn community is putting foresight and futures into their, some sort of profile. And it's like, you just can't, if you don't know how to be an electrician or a plumber, you just can't say, oh, I'm a plumber. I'm just an electrician, I've never studied engineering, but let me build you your bridge. You'd be like, no, we don't just let anybody like that come in. But because futures and foresight is something that has organically kind of grown, out of the 60s and 70s and so forth. And then, at the University of Hawaii being really the first program that, has launched, a formal training sort of program. Stellenbosch, where I was, they launched their Futures and Foresight training program in 1974. So they're almost 50 years old. So just this idea that we still don't know, do you need a degree? And I think a majority of people would say, no, this is very much a practical hands-on skill set that you learn. But so I'm always been intrigued with this, the side that really wants to do a credentialing process and a side that says, no, we just really need to leave this open. And I think, someone like Alex is going to always be critical of that side that doesn't get a little more rigor with, this sort of thing. Like, how do we, and APF has been one of the bodies that I know they've wrestled with this. And so I'm just intrigued that 10 years later, 20 years later, we're still wrestling with this sort of question.
A young field comparing to other fields, it's required, I feel like, to think about it this way, but at the same time, how can you make it accessible yet make sure that it's protected and it's done well to best practices. So my last question here is any like closing thoughts or anything that you want to mention that could help the next cohort.
If you're going to give me the open space, I'll put a plug in for Samista's latest blog, where I know she was talking about the liability. And I mean, I think this is really important. Like, we're not predicting the future. We all say that, and we know what that means. But just the idea that if you lead a group down the wrong path, what are the liabilities that you potentially, need to face there. Our firm, we maintain general liability and professional liability. So this covers us, and we're also a limited liability company. So there are lots of things that you can kind of do to just keep yourself on safe legal ground. So just a side note there. But for anyone looking at the, wanting to apply, stalk all 11 of us and find out who maybe is working in your area and reach out to them and say, hey, tell me about your experience, or, would you consider including this in there? Seek out, we're not, I don't think, we can't necessarily review your application beforehand, but we can recommend that, hey, reach out to your mentors, have them look through this. Because when you misspell things and are sloppy with your application, those have nothing to do with foresight. That just has to do with writing a really good proposal. So it's really key to write a good proposal that is concise and answers the questions and so forth. So yeah, all of us as fellows, we're keen on, chatting and working with other people that are interested. And, if you develop that relationship before you apply and so forth, and maybe you're not accepted, you can still do a lot of the fellowship activities and benefits without really being a part of a fellowship.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for sharing your experience. I'm pretty sure that people are going to find this very helpful. Thank you so much for your time. And if you feel that you need to know more about Stephen or the program in general, please reach out to him or to us. We're all open to answer your questions. Thank you so much, Stephen.
You're welcome.